The Volkswagen GTI gets a refresh for the 2025 model year, bringing in this Mk8.5 version of the GTI. And in this video, I'm going to cover all the differences and all the changes here for the exterior, the interior. You're going to take it for a drive and see what it's like out on the road, as well as talking about the kind of fuel economy you can expect, and also the pricing and how it compares to the competition these days. And so, as far as the GTI, well, if you're a fan of the manual, the first thing I'll get out of the way right away is that you can't get a manual in this anymore. It's all dual clutch automatic only. They claim emissions regulations in Europe, as well as an almost non-existent demand for the manual in Europe, even though like 30% of Americans wanted the manual here in the States. But anyway, it's gone, and maybe it'll return someday. But in the meantime, they're all automatic only now. Moving on from that though, we have some nice changes here otherwise for the Mk8.5 GTI. So you'll see that up front there, they all now get these new adaptive LED headlights, which are a little slimmer than the pre-refresh version. And they also have that red strip that goes all the way through them, goes all the way through that grille. And beneath that red strip, you also now have an illuminated light bar that goes into an illuminated Volkswagen badge. The front bumper has also been restyled to accommodate those headlights, and you see there's now those little fangs that come up near the fog light area, but those little 5 LED fog lights on each side still do remain from the pre-refresh, and I think that's still a cool touch, and I'm glad they kept that. Otherwise here, so coming down to the sides here on this top Autobahn trim, you get these new 19-inch wheels. There's two different 18-inch wheels you get for the SE and the S lower trims there. And they say that these wheels are inspired by the Mk8.5 GTI, and I can certainly see some of that, but they do also remind me of Alfa Romeo wheels, in my opinion. Beautiful wheels either way, but that's one little change. Also, you'll see that they, for some reason, decided to move the GTI badge to the door instead of having it on the fender where it rightly belongs and has been for a long time. But aside from that, no other changes here on the sides. There are two new colors now. There's a new silver and also a slate blue color that's quite nice. And then going out to the back, there's minor, tiny little changes to the taillights and the rear bumper, but it's insanely subtle. So unless you're an expert on these vehicles, you won't even notice the difference, honestly. And so overall, a nice little nip tuck here to keep it fresh looking. And I think it certainly is an improvement styling-wise, especially up front here compared to the pre-refresh. But let me know what you think about it in the comments below. The interior of the 2025 GTI gets even bigger changes than the outside, and you can see them right here with a massive 12.9-inch touchscreen now. You also have buttons that have returned to the steering wheel, thankfully, real buttons, and a few other nice little changes as well. So anyway, first thing, sitting down in these seats. So you have these nice leather seats here on the Autobahn trim, and they are heated as standard in all GTIs. They are ventilated here only in the Autobahn trim, and I will say that I'm reviewing this vehicle in the middle of the summer, and the ventilated seats barely do anything. At one point, I accidentally even bumped the screen control and didn't realize it. And I was driving along and I'm like, my seat feels a tiny bit cool. And I'm like, oh wait, it's on. But it was so subtle that I went probably 5 minutes of driving before I even realized that they were on. And that was with them on being on full blast. So, if you are someone who, is contemplating which trim to go for, if cooled seats are a major deciding factor for you, don't pay extra for them, because I honestly don't think it's worth springing for the Autobahn if that's really the only thing you want out of it. I think you can completely skip those just fine. I mean, it does do something, but not nearly enough to be worth the upcharge, in my opinion. But otherwise, there are power and memory seats here also in the Autobahn. You'll go down to manual seats in the other versions. And as far as the other trims, the base S still has the tartan plaid interior with cloth, which I really love, and that'd be my pick. There's also now a new art velour, which is apparently from the GTI Club Sport, that we now are getting that upholstery here. And it's a cool design, but just keep in mind that it's fuzzy microfiber kind of stuff, and it's not perforated from what I can tell. So that's going to probably be really hot in the summer, especially on your back and bottom. So just try it out maybe on a test drive or something first before you commit to that. But, thankfully this leather is nicely perforated, and the cloth should be nice and cool too. But anyway, moving on to the steering wheel. Again, buttons have returned, and that's only for GTI, by the way. Golf R still has the capacitive touch, unfortunately, but GTI has the buttons returning here. It's also a heated steering wheel standard, and this wheel is now pretty much perfect. Has a great 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches. The buttons are nice and easy to use and nicely laid out, in my opinion. And the only thing I'll say is I wish the paddle shifters were a little bit bigger. They're a little on the small side, but they work just fine. And moving on to the gauge cluster here. So that gets some minor tweaks tweaks, but it's still just a 10.3 inch display, and you know, does all the basics. I do like the amount of customization you have there though with the right and the left pods. I couldn't find a way to put the speed in the middle of the tack though. I'm not sure if I'm missing something there, but that's the only thing I wish it was kind of there instead of off down at the bottom there. But other than that, you know, a really nice gauge cluster setup, and I do like having like the boost gauge, for example, is fun, or your actual temperature readouts if you're wanting that, and so nicely done there. Also in the Autobahn trims here, you get a head-up display, and you know, nice to have, not a must-have in my opinion, but you know, still nice nonetheless. And then coming over to the middle here though, again, 12.9 inch touchscreen. That is an improvement over the 10-inch one we had before, and also it still does have these touch sliders for volume and for climate, but they're now illuminated at least, so they're easier to use at night. And this also is running this new Volkswagen infotainment software, and I think this is a huge improvement. It fixed a lot of my complaints. I love that we now have an ever-present row of climate controls there at the bottom, so you know, it's literally one tap to turn on your heated or ventilated seats, you know, and even just changing climate's very simple. And yeah, I really don't have any complaints with it anymore. Wireless Apple CarPlay connected flawlessly this week. It's a nice large display. Everything else is really easy to navigate. I still don't love the way they have the radio menu set up, but once you have all your favorites programmed in, it's going to be fine. I like that there's a player page now, so it can just show you all the song info and all that. And you know, you might also be worried that it's a little too big, and I'm 5'9", so I'm not super tall, and it basically comes up right to where the dashboard ends. So you know, if I'm slouching a little bit or I'm really low, then it can maybe come up a little bit higher than the dash, but whenever I'm in a proper sitting position here, it's basically no worse than looking over the dash. So just, you know, one little impression from my, you know, body type and seating position standpoint. And then moving down beyond that, you still do have these little touch sensitive buttons for, you know, a few quick access things there. Then you also see you have a nice large wireless charging pad here, which is standard, and it's also a ventilated wireless charging pad, and it now charges at 15 watts versus 5 for the old one. So faster charging, which would mean, you know, hotter temperatures, and so that's why they have the cooling now. So a nicely improved wireless charging pad, and in my week here, it did actually charge reliably because it's on a nice angle and nicely rubberized, so it doesn't slide around off a contact patch or anything. It's always been doing some good charging there, so I really appreciate that. There's also 2 USB-C jacks there, and you have your typical little shifter area, which really hasn't changed, and a little you know, spot for the key next to it, and also your 2 small cup holders with the one that can kind of slide away there if you want to have that be a larger storage space. You also do have a center armrest here, which is a small space. I'm not even sure you can fit everyone's sunglasses, but maybe some smaller sunglasses fit in there. Pretty small, but you know, not too bad, because you do also have a huge pocket in the door. You can fit a giant bottle in there, so that more than makes up for it. But the center armrest is nice and softly padded, so it's, you know, good for that. All the elbow points are good here, although you do still have hard plastic down by your knees. I kind of wish they would pad that like Mazda does, for example, on the Mazda 3 hatch, but you know, still just, you know, totally fine for this segment, this kind of vehicle, I think. You also have ambient lighting, which is a nice little touch at night, and you also have this Harman Kardon stereo here that you get in SE and Autobahn trims, and does sound pretty good. It's a little flat. I wish it was a little fuller sounding personally. I'm no audio expert, but it's not amazing. It's not terrible either. I'd have to, you know, try the bass stereo to truly compare if it's worth the upgrade or not, but this sounds nice, and you know, is fine. But another thing that I don't know if I would pay and jump up to a, you know, a higher trim for just that, but you know, nice to have nonetheless. Moving on to the back seat here in the GTI, all the space is the same as before. You know, no changes here dimensionally for the Mark 8.5. So that means that, you know, I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I have about an inch, maybe 2 inches tops to spare there. I mean, it's, you know, it's a little tight. It's a small hatchback, but you know, not too bad. If you do want more rear legroom, go for the GLI Jetta, because that's going to have a much roomier back seat. But I'm actually impressed with the headroom. You know, again, 5'9", and I still have several inches of headroom to spare, and they're really nice here. In the Autobahn, you get the tri-zone climate and heated outboard rear seats, which is honestly a little overboard for a car like this in my opinion, but you know, it's fun that they offer that for those that do want everything. And they also, of course, have their own fold down center armrest, air vents there, and also little pockets in those doors as well. Cargo space in GTI, again, unchanged as well, but you know, it's really usable, obviously, especially when you fold the seats down. But even when you don't fold the seats down, you know, it's a pretty long space for a vehicle of this type. but you know, not a whole lot of space. And you know, the nice thing is you can have, if you don't care about having a flat load floor, you can drop that floor and have more space there, but you'll see there's also a spare tire under there still, which is certainly appreciated. And once again, if you want a bigger cargo space, the Jetta GLI is going to be much better. It's a really nice large trunk in that car. Obviously for bikes or things like that, this is going to probably be better, but you know, for anything where you don't need, you know, a giant square to fit in there, you know, the Jetta is going to probably be the more practical one, honestly. So yeah, but overall, you know, still really nice interior. Personally though, I think if I was buying a GTI just based on interiors here, I would just go for the S. And you know, you have, again, so many good standard features that I don't think, you know, all the extra ones are worth paying so much extra money for. And I'll talk more about pricing and how they all compare later in the video. But let's start up and go for a drive. The GTI here has a Volkswagen's newer key, which is certainly a nice key, and does have some buttons there in the back. And I like the glossy finish, makes it feel a little fancier and more upscale than their old key. But of course it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start in SE and Autobahn. Most others these days, I think, make, you know, a proximity key standard, but in the base S GTI, you still have to pull the key out of your pocket and hit the unlock button that doesn't have proximity in the base S, which is the one real annoyance I have with the S. Otherwise, I gotta be completely happy with the S trim, but that one thing is pretty annoying if you're used to, you know, having your key in your pocket the whole time. I don't know why they cheaped out on that. That's one thing. Maybe 2026 we'll see them finally make that standard, but that's a little ridiculous. I mean, because they're still like 34 grand. To not have proximity key at 34 grand is a little bit of a sore spot. But anyway, SC and Autobahn, you just, you know, leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button here, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off here in the 2025 GTI. So the first thing you notice about it, I think the first thing that I noticed is that I think they kind of fixed the annoyance that I had with throttle response. So the last GTI review for Mark 8 was actually a manual, but the dual clutch Golf R I really didn't enjoy because it was so set up to hypermile as far as throttle response, and the transmission just wanting to always be in too high of a gear. And this seems a lot more eager. It could be a difference with the GTI. I'm going to be having a Golf R here for the Mark 8.5 in just a few weeks, so stay tuned and subscribe for that, for a truly back-to-back comparison. But I'm pretty sure this is much, much better than what GTI used to be, and certainly better than the last Golf R I experienced. So that means that, you know, it still isn't perfect. It can be a little rough at first start whenever the clutch kind of kicks in, and I'm kind of surprised they didn't smooth that over better, but maybe that was the cost that they had to, you know, change in order to give you that quicker response. I don't know, but I don't even care, because it's just the fact that now when I put my foot down, I get the acceleration I'm looking for, I get the response I want, and I'm happy. So I'm really, really just happy that they changed it. They also say that whenever you are in the sport mode for the transmission, that you now also have quicker shifts. We'll test that out here in a minute. But otherwise here, you know, all the other same great GTI traits remain. And I think basically in every other way, it's unchanged driving-wise from the pre-refresh. So if you're familiar with how Mark 8 GTI drives, I'll save you some time. Use the timestamps, go to the updated pricing and how it compares to the competition these days if you want to hear that stuff. But for anyone else that's unfamiliar with GTI, all the driver inputs are very well done. Steering is nicely weighted to be, you know, not too heavy, but not too light, just right, in my opinion. Has a nice amount of feel too. Throttle response, again, nice and good. Brakes also have a little bit of dead travel, but then do bite very strongly. And to me, that's nice because it allows them to be easy to use without being rough and, you know, jerky with them. So I really like the way they're set up. I think just all that stuff they really did nail. And it's just been one of these vehicles that I think only Honda with the Civic Si matches this level of precision and dialed in-ness that you get here with this compared to everything else in this segment that sometimes can be a little tricky. I think maybe if you were going a little higher in price, Toyota GR Corolla is also just as good as this, but everything else to me is a little less good than GTI. And it's also really nice and quiet, and it's a very refined vehicle for these new gen Golfs. It's really well done. You also have excellent visibility here, a nice thin A-pillar. I like the little window down there, which does actually help at the corner, and nice nice large side windows. The view out of the back is great. Of course, it's a nice small car. You have a backup camera. No 360 camera, unfortunately. That is something that Mazda 3 hatch does give you in its top turbo trim, but basically all the others don't offer that either. But yeah, you know, it has a park assist and all that as well. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the sport driving mode, which again puts everything into the sportiest setting, including the transmission. So that's all set. And I'm just going to leave it in automatic mode though for now, and let's turn down onto this back road and see how it accelerates. Here we go. Very nice. It was a split second, but it really, you know, it's still, oh man, it started accelerating right away, and I do appreciate that. So there's no lag there. But man, this thing really still flies very nicely. You still have the motor's completely unchanged. It's the 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder, the EA888, that is a real beast of a motor, and stock makes 241 horsepower, 273 pound-feet of torque, and because of the way this thing is so impressively geared with this 7-speed dual clutch, and the way the Germans are just so good at optimizing acceleration with the amount of power they're working with, means that this thing can rip off mid 5 seconds 0 to 60 times, which, you know, matches or beats WRX, which has more horsepower, and just, you know, is actually keeping up with even GR Corolla, honestly, which has 300 horsepower. So I mean, I don't know if they're just not rating this high enough and that it actually is making more power than what they claim, or again, if it's just the way they optimize everything, I don't know. But I mean, this thing is man, and the way it's very affirmative with the way it bangs into gear there whenever you floor it and you hit that kickdown switch on the gas pedal at the bottom. This thing moves. It is so much faster than those numbers suggest, and you know, if you don't need the 4-wheel traction of the Golf R, I don't think you need to go up the Golf R. Again, I've spent multiple weeks with multiple Golf Rs over the past few generations. They're fast, they're fun, they're great, but to me, this is enough. Even on the streets, I know it sounds like not a lot of horsepower these days, but it's truly fast enough. I promise you. You will, I mean, you're gonna have to be on very high speed limit roads to want more out of this thing. And of course, there's a plentiful amount of options in the aftermarket if you do want more power. But yeah, it's really, really good. I'm gonna try some manual shifts here though, just briefly. Okay, nice and responsive. First gear. Oh, little crackles and pops. Little delay there, still on the upshifts, but not bad. Anyway, coming up some corners here I always take. Let's see how this thing handles. So, really nice handling here. GTI, of course, that's what it's famous for, is the handling, and you know, it doesn't disappoint here. So, you know, this one, again, having the 19-inch wheels, the Autobahn also gives you summer tires. They're hand-cooked Ventus summer tires here, and I've had no complaints with the grip here this week. It's really good, and you know, it does a good job putting the power down here. If you go for anything other than Autobahn, though, you will get all-season tires, but obviously tires are a very easy upgrade. If you want more grip, you know, pick your favorite summer tire and have a blast. You know, very easy to improve and really make a huge improvement as well whenever you just do a simple tire swap. But I'm going to go ahead and put it back into the automatic mode here, let it do its own thing. Yeah, brakes do feel really nice, and everything else, again, otherwise is the same. So that means Autobahn is still the only trim that gets the adaptive dampers, and so you have them here in this, and it's great because you have the custom modes. So if, you know, you want to have the suspension be soft and everything else be sporty, you can go in and change that, and I love that duality and that customization that you have there. And these are still nice and light here, even with the bigger touchscreen. You know, these weigh under 3,200 pounds. It's like 3,183, I think, is what Road and Track got. And so, you know, really just, it feels really nice and light in corners. But because of the heavier steering, it still feels substantial. And, you know, it doesn't feel like it's this little dainty plaything. Like, it still feels like it's, you know, got some weight to it for sure. And another acceleration. Yeah, this thing, I love the little burps on the upshift too. Yeah, this thing is so good. But we're going to be going up this hill now, so we're going to be able to put the limited slip differential, the VAQ differential, to work here, which is something that comes standard on all of these, thankfully, and you know, is really, you know, one of the nice perks here of the GTI, to give you really good traction, whether you are just accelerating out of a corner and doing some spirited driving, or if you are in bad weather circumstances where, you know, limited slip diff really helps. But I mean, it pulls you out of that corner so flawlessly that even if you're an idiot and you're applying applying the gas too early coming out of a corner, it really does, you know, work through that and really tries to slingshot you out of the corner there, and it does an excellent job. These things are so much fun, and I've also been enjoying the little bit of a turbo sound you get here this week, and there's also the ability to customize the sounds. You can have more or less if you'd like, because it is piping in a little bit, but I personally think it sounds good. I'm all about, you know, the more sound the better, especially these days. So, you know, I'm not complaining, but you can turn off that. But I don't know if you can hear, but every once in a while you get the whooshy sounds from the turbo, and it's very fun. But yeah, it's it's just a scalpel through corners, and it's so flat, so composed, and yeah, it just still is the fantastic handler it's always been. But I'm going to try out a few more manual shifts here. I love the downshifts, and if that's what it was improved, then that's great. But let's try some upshifts here. I mean, you can hear when I pull the paddle and when it shifts. It's still a little slow there. I wanted to bang into every upshift as well, and maybe for durability reasons they can't, you know, make it too harsh. But you know, it's going to be fine. It's going to be more than enough to play with if you happen to want to do the manual shifting. Maybe more of you will want to if you're now forced into this dual clutch and you don't have the option to, you know, do the manual transmission. At least you got the manual shifting here, and you know, I'd say it is very enjoyable. I like more and more of those crackles and pops. I like that. It's subtle, you know, it's not Elantra N crazy, but it's there, and it's nice, and you know, it kind of all fits with the vibe of GTI, which is fun, and you know, it wants to give you that gratification and that satisfaction, but not so much that it's, you know, a menace to society and it's being super loud, or that it's, you know, really over the top. You know, you don't have to like be embarrassed going nuts in this thing. It's all very subtle, and I can appreciate that, honestly. As much as I love the hilarity of Elantra N, I think, you know, that this is a little easier to live with sometimes, especially if you're not an extrovert. And I think this is kind of like the enthusiast performance, you know, compact for the introvert in a way. Obviously, you can make it more extroverted if you want, and slap on, you know, a nice loud exhaust and a tune that makes it crazy if you want. But factory, I just think that's why the GTI sells so well into such a diverse set of buyers. You know, there's just regular older professionals that drive them. There's young people that love them, and everyone in between. And I think that is just kind of brilliant. You know, so many car companies, they, you know, shoot for one demographic and, you know, mostly, you know, hit that. But I think with the GTI, it's got such a widespread amount of appeal, and it's something for everyone in so many ways. And I mean, that's really hard to come across these days. Everything is so specialized, but GTI just kind of catches everybody, and, you know, gives them everyone something that they can enjoy here. And you know, and then also you can go ahead and put it back into the comfort mode here, calm down and just relax, you know. And if you just need some serenity after your day at work or whatever, it can be nice and chill, and just be a nice relaxing drive too. And now we're out on the highway here in the GTI, and I do have the travel assist on, which I believe comes standard on everything here. I think GTI's all basically come fully loaded, thankfully, these days, as far as the safety stuff goes. And so that means you have adaptive cruise control standard, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, the park sensors, you know, all that stuff comes standard, I believe. And so it's really great. But, you know, out here on the highway, you know, I mean, it still is, you know, a performance economy car kind of thing. So you got a good amount of road noise here at 60 miles per hour, and, you know, it's just going to be, that's one of the things where it's not going to be super refined. If you want to have a little more refinement there, you're probably going to need to go up to the Audi and, you know, go for an A3 with the same kind of powertrain, or, you know, S3. But, you know, as far as everything else goes here, I mean, the travel assist is actually really good. I used this newest version of travel assist in the new Tiguan, actually, not too long ago for a long highway trip, and it's a really good adaptive cruise control system. But I mean, yeah, you can hear the road noise is quite loud in here still, and that hasn't been changed for 2025. And I kind of wish they would have maybe improved it a little bit, but I know they got to keep the weight down on these. But, you know, gentle corner here coming up, just to demonstrate how I'm just kind of, you know, mostly letting it do the steering, just kind of hovering my hands here, babysitting it. But It is still a hands-on system. You can't take your hands off or anything. It will scold you eventually. But, you know, it's just very natural with the assistance. You know, some of these older gen systems were really ping-pongy or really kind of darty. This, it's very smooth and just does a good job of centering itself in the lane. Yeah, but otherwise, you know, aside from the road noise here, it's a nice cruiser out here on the highway. This thing does sound good. I love that exhaust note. Anyway, so as far as fuel economy goes here in the GTI, it gets 24 mpg in the city, 32 on the highway, and 27 combined. And in my driving here, I've been averaging here 25.4 mpg. So I am overperforming the city rating by 1.5 mpg basically, and that's impressive because typically in my driving this same kind of stuff around town suburban driving primarily with a little bit of highway mixed in, I'm typically averaging around maybe city if I'm lucky, or 1 to 2 mpg less than the city rating. So to be overperforming the city rating is really rare for me. And you know, this is another thing with this engine, is I think it is certainly able to overperform its EPA estimates. And Volkswagens in general, I feel like they've always oftentimes been more fuel efficient than they give themselves credit for, or the EPA gives them credit for. And so, you know, I mean, that just leads me to think that I could actually get even better fuel economy if I took it easier, or, you know, I mean, like even some of the idling I did to film this interior dropped down a little bit. So we could even probably round it up to 26 here. And so, and I mean, that's with me again, getting on it and really enjoying it. I have no doubts this thing will overperform its EPA estimates there for sure. And that's really good because a lot of the stuff in this segment does struggle with fuel economy. There are some others that do really good, like Civic Si, you know, I was able to get, I think, almost like 30 mpg in that. But, you know, there's others like WRX where, I mean, you're lucky if you get 20. So, I mean, you know, this is really nice. If you are coming out of something like a WRX or something like that, I mean, yeah, this is going to be, even I think over a launcher end, this is a nice little improvement in fuel economy. And then the last thing to mention here, though, is the pricing and how it compares to the competition. So, as far as pricing goes, so these start right around $33,670 for that base S, which again, very well equipped, heated seats, heated steering wheel, you know, the great adaptive headlights, again, this huge screen, all these things. I mean, like previously with Mk8 GTI, you know, you had to go up to higher trims to get the bigger screen, otherwise you had a smaller one. So, I mean, the fact that everyone gets this great big screen and everything, and the prices have only gone up, I think, around $500 or so compared to the last, you know, pre-refresh, is actually a really nice, you know, amount of stuff for very little extra money. Now, if you want to spend about $5,000 more, you go up to the SE trim. That again gives you those art velour seats, as well as that's how you get the Harman Kardon stereo, which again I said probably take or leave, as well as this panoramic moonroof they call it, which is generous. It's not really panoramic. It's slightly oversized compared to a regular moonroof, but that's about it. But it's nice to have because otherwise you get no moonroof at all in the base one. So that's certainly a nice touch. You also do get that important proximity key though in that SE trim, and you also have the option for leather for $1,300. But if you want leather, you're better off just going up to the Autobahn trim, which those start at about $42,000. And at that price point, again, that's where you get the head-up display. That's where you get the leather, ventilated seats, the 3-zone climate control with the heated second row, as well as the power and memory seat. And memory is certainly a nice touch if you are, you know, sharing the vehicle with someone else. So, I mean, Autobahn, you know, still at 42 grand. That is expensive. You know, I remember the days when you could get a Golf R for around that money. But, you know, these days, comparably speaking, you know, it is very, you know, impressively priced compared to its competitors, I'd say. And if you are looking for the best deal possible on a GTI, you're definitely going to head over to mattmoranmotoring.com. There you'll get access to dealer invoice pricing when you go to the new car quotes page, as well as getting connected to a local dealer that can show you one of these in person, let you take it for a test drive, and see what you think about the new GTI. So there's going to be a link in the description, as well as a link in a pinned comment to take you straight to that site and get you all that information. And like I kind of alluded to earlier, I think if I were buying one of these, I would just go for the base S trim, partially because I'm a sucker for those plaid seats, but also just because, again, you get so much basic, you know, standard features that there's really no need to go up to the higher trims. You know, I would just live with not having the keyless proximity, you know, access, and otherwise, you know, I think, you know, that's going to be the best value, especially these days with car prices being so high. You know, spending another $9,000 or so for this Autobahn trim, I don't know if it's, you know, worth that personally, but again, it all comes down to your deal and all of that. But as far as how this compares to the competition, So I think, again, they do have it priced very, very well. And so the only thing I will say is that there is also the Jetta GLI, from Volkswagen as well. And that you can get the Autobahn trim fully loaded for like $34,000. Now, I don't think GLI handles as well as GTI. And some of the interior materials aren't quite as good. You don't get this huge big screen. You're still stuck with the small little 8-inch screen that they have, from the older Volkswagen days. So you're clearly downgrading in some areas, but it still offers a manual transmission. And the fact that you get, all the goodies. You get the adaptive dampers, you get the cooled seats, the leather, all that stuff, the ambient lighting, the moonroof, and you get, again, more rear leg room, the bigger trunk for, again, we're talking between 42 for this and same Autobahn trim for GLI is 34. Is your $8,000 difference? I know a lot of people, they were always GTI people and, weren't crazy about GLI, but I think now is the time to take a good hard look at GLI and give it a test drive, give it a try, see what you think, because I think, honestly, the fact that, again, you get the manual, for those that are upset about GTI losing it, go buy the GLI manual. Maybe buying enough manual GLIs will send the message to Volkswagen that it's worth supporting, like they are supporting it with the GLI. I just think that's, if you're a Volkswagen fan, you like everything else here, I think GLI is probably the answer if, GTI doesn't cut it for you. Now, there's a lot of other great options still, thankfully, these days as well. So I think another one that actually doesn't really get a whole lot of attention is the Mazda 3 turbo hatch. That's the only other one really in this segment that's a hatchback still. And that is a really cool combo. It's all-wheel drive only. So you kind of are, it's like a midway point between GTI and Golf R in a way. 250 horsepower, 320 pound-feet of torque, a normal 6-speed automatic. Not great for manual shifting, but, it works well enough if you just leave it in drive and you're not fiddling with paddle shifters all the time. It's a really, nice setup and a lot of power. And those, again, if you're okay with the sand color, because there's a carbon edition that gives you the turbo at a lower price, if you're okay with that color, it's, like 34 and change for that as well, with, again, way more power. And then if you, want any other color, though, that is going to be in the mid to high $38,000 range. So, then you are starting higher than this, but again, that gives you, for that version, the 360 camera, Bose stereo, which is much better than this one in my opinion. You get the leatherette kind of seats that are very nice, and you get, another hatchback as well. It's a little less practical maybe than this, but, still really, a nice, cool hatchback. And, I'd say that doesn't handle as well as this for sure. It feels a little heavier, and it's not really set up to be a sporty competitor, honestly. It's more so about Mazda competing with Audi A3 and stuff like that. But I think that, with some minor mods, you put, a different set of wheels and tires on it, and maybe a few minor suspension mods, I think you would have something that, does get pretty close to this. Probably won't be quite as brilliant as this, but good enough that, again, for such, an undercutting price point, I think, could actually be something that makes some sense. And with all that savings you have some, money for mods if you do want to improve the handling there. So it's, just something I think worth checking out that doesn't get mentioned a whole lot. Otherwise, the other ones that do get, mentioned a whole lot more, for example, we have Elantra N. Also not a hatchback. Unfortunately, we don't have Veloster N anymore. But, with Elantra N, you get 276 horsepower, 286 with their dual clutch, but that still offers a fantastic manual. And that gives you adaptive dampers, active exhaust that you can have various sounds for, to make it louder or quieter. And obviously that's more, again, in your face with the styling. It's got the wing on the back and, just a little bit crazier. But if you're okay with the extrovertedness of Elantra N and the fact that the interior isn't quite as nice as this, but it's not far off. You still have heated seats, you still have grippy Alcantara sport bucket seats that are great. Not quite as nice, but it does still give you like a Bose stereo, for example, and stuff. And those are $35,000. And so if you are actually serious about performance, I still think Elantra N drives better than this and is the better way to go. If performance is your number one focus, you should be driving an Elantra N if you want to spend mid-30s on, something small like this. And so I still think that is the performance, bargain of this segment for sure. Other stuff to consider, of course, is Honda Civic Si. Now that's a lot less power, 200 horsepower, and it feels a lot slower than this. I mean, even just by the numbers, obviously you got 40 less horsepower, but I mean, the fact that this is probably overperforming, I mean, it is a wide margin of performance as far as acceleration between this and Si. I certainly think this is a lot more fun in a straight line. The Civic has, again, fantastic handling, a great manual only, of course, still for that, and those are $32,000, so also cheaper, and there's no way to load them up. So, you know, they are less power, but also a lot less money, and less creature comforts as well. No adaptive dampers. You have to go up to the Integra for that. But even honestly, you can get an Integra that's, you know, got some nice equipment if you do want the adaptive dampers and some extra luxury features, and that still is, you know, well under $40,000. So that's also a competitor that is actually luxury and still giving you, you know, some nice enhancements there. So those are two to consider if, you know, straight line speed isn't an all-important factor for you. And if you are, I mean, you know, Civic Type R is only, you know, high 40s. So if you're already in the 40s with one of these, a few grand more if you want a really insane, you know, performance hot hatch, you know, that could be the way to go there too. But but this is, again, still just a very nice happy medium. Otherwise, though, you know, another competitor people often look at is the WRX. WRX has gotten a lot more expensive for 2025, unfortunately, because of the tariffs. They took a bigger jump than most others who were trying to hold off as of the time we're filming this here in the summer of 2025. But base WRX is 39 grand. So, I mean, way more than this. If you want one with adaptive dampers, you got to go up to either the GT or the TS. Both of those are $49,000 now. So much more expensive. And, you know, also the automatic in the WRX is still just a CVT. So it's manual, you know, if you want the sportiest experience. I mean, WRX is fine. It's just very expensive these days, so I can't recommend it because, again, everyone else, at least right now, is undercutting them on price pretty significantly. The only other one that I will mention is my favorite in this segment, the Toyota GR Corolla. Now, those start at $40,000, so again, you know, it's a lot higher, and at that price point, you know, you have a basic interior, you don't have any of the creature comforts, so it is really, you know, kind of the next step up as far as pricing goes. If you want to fully load one of those, you are going to be spending very high 40s, again, just like all those other really high performing hot hatches, but 300 horsepower, all-wheel drive with a, you know, diff you can switch up on the fly, and just pure handling magic. So much fun from that little turbo 3-cylinder. It's a ton of fun. It has so much character, more character than this in my opinion, and really, really fun. And again, if you don't need all the creature comforts, again, you are still paying about 7 grand more, maybe 6 grand more for a base version of this versus that, and you still get more stuff in the base version of this than base GR Corolla. But you know, if you do want some real magic there and you're willing to have a flexible budget, that's another one that I would recommend checking out as well. But anyway, overall, you know, I still love GTI. I love, you know, again, it's more introverted nature while still giving you all the fun, all the luxury, all the creature comforts, and, you know, doing it in this very conservative looking package is very much appealing for a lot of people, I think, myself included. And, you know, now they fixed the dual clutch here. I still would rather have had the manual, but, you know, this is a vehicle that I would be happy to daily drive. I really have enjoyed my week with it here. And, you know, again, if the pricing and the deal works out for you on one of these, or it fits exactly what you're looking for, absolutely do recommend the GTI. It's a ton of fun. So anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the 2025 GTI. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Volkswagen for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. Yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.